Let's go over installation and setup. Here is a step-by-step guide to installing TensorFlow using pip. So first step is prerequisites. Before installing TensorFlow, make sure you have Python installed on your system. TensorFlow supports Python versions 3.6, 3.7, 3.8 and 3.9. Create a virtual environment. This is an optional step. It is recommended to create a virtual environment for your TensorFlow project to avoid conflicts with other Python packages. You can use venv or virtual env for this purpose. If you have done Python programming before, you probably have come across this, but if you have not, take a look at it. So let's see how easy it is to create one. So first step is you just say python 3 -m venv and give a name which is myenv to that environment. Next, activate the virtual environment. For Mac OS Linux, you can just say source myenv/bin/activate. For Windows, you can say myenv/scripts/activate as shown on the screen. If you have an issue, please leave them in the comments. Next step is installing TensorFlow using pip. Once your virtual environment is activated, you can install TensorFlow using pip. Depending on your system and hardware, you can choose between TensorFlow CPU or TensorFlow GPU versions. For TensorFlow CPU, you can just use pip install TensorFlow. For TensorFlow GPU, first of all, it requires CUDA compatible GPU and cuDNN. That you can do by typing pip install TensorFlow-GPU. Next step is verify that the installation went through properly. After the installation is complete, you can verify that TensorFlow is installed correctly by importing it in a Python script or the Python interpreter. You can do that by typing import TensorFlow as tf and then print tf.__version__. This will print the version of TensorFlow installed on your system. Once you're done installing and working on it, you can actually deactivate the virtual environment if you don't need it anymore instead of running the virtual environment. It might take your processor speed or make your computer or system a little slow. So deactivating the virtual environment, you just have to type deactivate and it's done. Some of the things that you have to actually think about, or some notes, is it's recommended to install TensorFlow within a virtual environment to manage dependencies cleanly. Make sure you have the necessary system requirements for TensorFlow GPU if you are installing the GPU version. You can refer to the official TensorFlow installation guide for more detailed instructions and troubleshooting tips. You can search installing TensorFlow and it will take you to tensorflow.org/install. By following these steps, you'll be able to install TensorFlow using pip and start building and training machine learning models with TensorFlow in your Python environment. Next is installing TensorFlow with GPU support. Now this is an optional, but if you want to play with it, you can follow these steps. Installing TensorFlow with GPU supports enables you to leverage the computational power of your graphics processing unit, which is GPU, for accelerated training of deep learning models. Here's a step-by-step guide to installing TensorFlow with GPU support. Step 1. Verify your GPU compatibility. Before installing TensorFlow with GPU support, ensure that your GPU is compatible with TensorFlow. TensorFlow requires a CUDA-enabled GPU and cuDNN library for GPU acceleration. Check the TensorFlow documentation for the list of supported GPUs and CUDA versions if you don't know what I'm talking about. Step 2 is install CUDA toolkit and cuDNN. Download and install the CUDA toolkit and cuDNN library compatible with your GPU from the NVIDIA website. Follow the installation instructions provided by NVIDIA for your specific operating system. Now, installing NVIDIA GPU drivers is the next step, where you ensure that you have the latest NVIDIA GPU drivers installed for your GPU. You can download and install the drivers from the NVIDIA website or use your package manager to install them on Linux. Next, which is an optional step, as I mentioned, creating a virtual environment is always an optional step, but it helps you to cleanly manage your dependencies. It is recommended, but it's still optional. So what you do is you have to give the command python3-m venv my environment, which is the name of the environment that you want to use. Then you use that same name that you created for the environment /bin/activate. On Windows, you can do myenv/script/activate, same as the steps before. Next, installing TensorFlow GPU version. Once your virtual environment is activated, you can install the TensorFlow GPU version using the pip command, pip install TensorFlow-GPU. Next, again, verify the GPU support. After installing TensorFlow GPU, you can verify that TensorFlow is using the GPU acceleration by importing TensorFlow and checking the list of available GPUs. You can do that. First, import TensorFlow using import TensorFlow STF. Next, print, I can just say number of GPUs available, and you can say length of tf.config.experimental.list_physical_devices GPU. This will print the number of GPUs available on your system. Next step is configure TensorFlow to use GPU. This is also, again, an optional feature. By default, TensorFlow automatically detects and uses available GPUs. However, you can manually configure TensorFlow to use specific GPUs or limit GPU memory usage if needed. Refer to the TensorFlow documentation for instruction on this. I'm not going to go over that in this step. Next, again, at the last step is deactivate the virtual environment if you want to. But it's good to clean up whatever you've done, so it saves your processing power. Once you're done with the TensorFlow, you can deactivate the virtual environment using the deactivate command. That's it. You have successfully installed TensorFlow with GPU support. Now you can take advantage of GPU acceleration to train deep learning models faster and more efficiently. Remember to consult the official TensorFlow documentation and resources for additional configuration options and best practices when working with TensorFlow GPU. If you still have any questions on these, or if you get stuck somewhere, or if you need more information, do leave us comments. Next, we're going to go over how to install TensorFlow on different platforms, be it Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. So let's go over them one at a time. Installing TensorFlow on different platforms like Windows, Mac OS, and Linux may have slight variations in the process, as you saw probably above, due to differences in the underlying operating systems. Here's a detailed guide on how to do that. So first step is installing TensorFlow on Windows. Using pip, open a command prompt window with administrative privileges, because you're going to run pip. Then create a virtual environment by using the command that we saw yesterday above. python-m venv my environment, name whatever you feel like. Again, use that same name that you created for the environment /scripts/activate. Now next, install the TensorFlow using pip install TensorFlow. Now if you want to use Anaconda, what you have to do is, if you want to use Anaconda for installing instead of pip, what you have to do is first install Anaconda from the official website and add it to your system part during installation. You can probably look at that steps outside this course. Then open the Anaconda prompt, create a virtual environment. This is again optional. You can say conda space create -n myenv space python equal to 3.28, the version of Python that you want to use, and myenv is the environment that whatever name you want to give. Again, conda activate myenv. And then to install TensorFlow using conda, just say conda install TensorFlow. That's it. Next, installing TensorFlow on Mac OS. Now using pip, you can open the terminal, create a virtual environment as we saw above, python3-m venv myenv, the name that you want to give, then source myenv/bin/activate. Now installing TensorFlow, pip install TensorFlow. Now in Mac, you can also use Homebrew for CPU only though. So first install Homebrew from official website if you don't have it already installed. I doubt that you might not, because everybody has Homebrew installed if you have done some kind of development. Open the terminal, install TensorFlow by giving the command brew install TensorFlow. Next, installing TensorFlow on Linux. Be it Ubuntu machine or a Debian, you can use these commands. Now let's look at how to use pip to install. So first open the terminal, install the necessary dependencies. You can say sudo apt update just to make sure that your apt is updated. Next, sudo apt install python3-dev, python3-pip, python3-vn, as I've displayed above here. Just follow these. Next, create a virtual environment, again optional, python 3-m-venv my environment, name of the environment. Then you can source my_n/pin/activate. It looks exactly same, almost same as Mac, because they're the same base. Next is installing TensorFlow using pip install TensorFlow, and that's it. It will be available. Now for using apt for CPU only versions, what you can do is you can open terminal, install TensorFlow by saying sudo apt install python 3 TensorFlow. Using apt for GPU version, you can follow the official TensorFlow documentation for installing CUDA.toolkit and CUDNN. Then install the TensorFlow GPU version by giving the command sudo apt update, sudo apt install python 3-tensorflow-gpu. For Windows and Mac OS, you may need to install additional dependencies for TensorFlow GPU support, such as CUDA toolkit and CUDNN, as per the official documentation, which you might not have if you have not used before. Always check the official TensorFlow documentation for the latest installation instructions and compatibility information for each platform. Consider using virtual environments to manage dependencies and avoid conflicts with system-wide packages. TensorFlow installation commands may change over time, so always refer to the latest documentation for accurate instructions. It's 2024 January. These are the current updated instructions. If there's something changed, it's always best to get help from there. You can always search on Stack Overflow or other places if you get stuck somewhere, but you can always write comments here, leave comments to us, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible if you get stuck somewhere.